name's Stonesy Boy, and welcome back to Reading with Stonesy. Today is going to be a pretty short day, and so will tomorrow, because today we're reading 132 to 152, and tomorrow we're reading 150, 156 to 180. So tomorrow's a bit longer, but it's okay. That's okay. Whew. So, shall we begin? But first, like everyone should, drink water. Okay. Y'all ready? Okay. Let's do this. She was just being paranoid. Was she about to blow up her marriage, her very new marriage, for no good reason? Selena remembered her brother's wedding day advice. Don't screw it up. Was she screwing it up? Something rustled behind the sofa. Selena grabbed for a rolling pin that she started to turn. So before Selena could get a grip on the rolling pin or see what was behind her, a hand clamped over her mouth. Selena started to kick into overdrive. She tried to scream, but her hand stifled the noise. Selena failed for the rolling pin. Back of her head knocked against it. It rolled off the sofa. It hit the rug and a thunk. Shh, Cade said. Selena twisted her neck so she could look up and behind her. Cade was leaning over the back of the sofa. Had he been hiding behind there? Why? Why was he doing it? Had it been him making all those sounds? Again, why? Selena goggled at her husband. Cade put his finger over his lips. His gaze, intense, almost deranged, darted all around the room. Selena started into a face of the man she loved for over 2 years. It was a face she thought she knew better than her own. And the man that was someone she knew that well, too. She planned to spend her life with him. He was like an extension of her. Now she rarely recognized him. Yes, Cade still had a thick black hair and brows, the green eyes, the sculpted cheeks shadowed his black whiskers as usual. She still had a wide mouth and even white teeth, but all those features now looked distorted somehow. They looked like they'd been infected, tinged by something dark and menacing. Selena tried to reach her head away from Cade's hand. She pulled her tighter against the back of the sofa. Turning her head, she couldn't see him anymore. She felt the pressure of his head against the top of hers. If you upset Lally, Cade whispered, you'll end up in the trunk next. Selena felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. She struggled to suck in air through her nose, which was partly covered by Cade's hard palm. Cade's breath was sour. He even had breath like that before. She smelled his morning breath and his garlic breath and his peanut butter breath, but this was acrid, as if he was exhaling whatever poison he'd kept hidden inside for many, many years. Promise you won't scream if I take my hand away, Cade whispered. His whisper was so quiet that Selena could barely make out words. His warm, impulsive breath puffed into her ear. Selena nodded several times. Why bother screaming? No one but Cade could hear her anyway. Promise? Cade whispered. Selena nodded again. Cade took his hand away from Selena's mouth. She turned and opened her mouth. Cade made another shushing gesture. She leaned in close to her. Don't speak. You really don't want to upset Lally, Cade whispered. Selena used her very ounce of willpower. She had to keep her expression blank. She didn't move or make a sound. Cade hurried around the sofa and sat down next to Selena. She didn't look at him again. She couldn't. She stared right straight ahead, and she stayed silent. Set her mind, however, Selena was screaming her head off. She was tearing towards the door. She was coming in grips with the only logical conclusion presented by the facts. Her husband was insane. Selena looked toward the entryway. Could she make it in front of the front door before Cade caught her? She glanced at Cade. He cocked his head at her. Then he, too, looked toward the front door. He shook his head slowly, once. He returned to scanning the room. Cade was sitting close enough to Selena that she could feel his heat and muscled thigh against hers. She was so familiar with the solid feel of him, but now the pressure against her own leg felt foreign, invasive. You killed Daniel, didn't you? Selena whispered. She didn't know what she was going to ask the question until it was out of her mouth. She hadn't let herself consciously think about the conclusion she reached when Janice had told her about the boy who had died. But clearly Selena had known. Why else had she raced home to pack? Why else had she planned to leave the man she loved? Cade turned to her stare, and he shook his head no. He whispered. He shook again. It was Lally. He turned and looked behind him. He craned his neck to look up the stairs. He shook his head a third time. The game was only for two. Prickles of terror cascaded through Selena's nervous system. Her throat closed. She fought to breathe. Somehow enough, she was able to keep her expression tranquil. Selena dropped her gaze, looking at the rolling pin. Her shoulders slumped. The rolling pin had spun over the rug and now hit. It was under the coffee table. Selena could never be able to reach it before Cade reacted. Turning toward Cade, Selena tried to look loving and concerned. Knowing what Lally did must have been terrible for you, she whispered. Cade looked at Selena as if he had no idea what she was talking about. She tamped down with a revolution and touched Cade's forearm. Cade, honey, if Lally's in here, we need to leave. Why don't we leave? Cade frowned. He turned and looked toward the front door. He shook his head. Selena didn't think. She just acted. Sleeping off the sofa, Selena lunged for the brass lamp on the nearest end table. She yanked the cord free of the plug in the floor. Cade started to stand and reach for Selena, but before he could, she gripped the lamp by its neck, crunching his drum straight. When she swung the lamp like a baseball bat, she bashed it base against the side of Cade's head. Cade scattered back and then fell into the coffee table. She hit his temple the table, and he was limp when he slumped to the floor. Selena didn't wait to see if Cade could move. She dropped the lamp and took off. Because Cade's body blocked Selena's path to the front door, she started toward the kitchen. She had taken 2 steps, though, when she saw a hint of white out of the corner of her eye. Selena whipped her gaze towards it, and she did. Cade moaned and shifted. Selena lost her ability to reason. She turned to gallop up the stairs. At the top of the stairs, Selena realized she had been an idiot. She should have tried to make it to the back door. Now, though, she was on the 2nd floor. Up there, she had nowhere to get out of the house unless she wanted to leap from the 2nd floor window. She glanced back down the stairs. She heard Cade groan again. No, she couldn't risk going down there again. She looked down the hall. Where could she hide? Scuffling sound came from the living room. Selena ran down the hall. When she reached the guest bedroom door, she dashed into the room. She charged toward the closet, flung it open, and dove into the vial of vintage clothes. She turned and pulled the closet door closed. That might have not been the best hiding place in the world, but familiarity of Selena's things gave her comfort. She could draw and let comfort and help her think about her next step. Right now, she didn't know what to do next. She knew she couldn't hide in here forever, of course. The house wasn't that big. If Cade searched for her, he'd eventually find her. Maybe before then, though, she'd come up with a plan. Selena crouched behind the old dresses. Her breathing was so loud that the cramped darkness sounded like she was sharing space with a pack of panting dogs. Selena gulped air for several seconds. She had so quiet down there she couldn't listen for Cade if all she could hear were his bellowing inhalations. Selena pulled herself into a tight little ball. She stared into the darkness, pressing it in around her. Although a tight trickle of light reached into the closet, and from under the door it was only enough to give clothes that shielded Selena a ghostly presence. Selena started a dim floating shape and tried to steady her breathing. Selena was starting to get control of herself when the clothing draped around her swished, and then a whisper came out of the darkness. The whisper's message, short, was filled with meaning. Hi. Selena screamed louder than she ever screamed in her life. Cade's conscience swam in the blackness. His thoughts were blanketed by murk. Though his mental nothingness, however, sound reached him, she heard the echo of piercing screams. Then the curtain of oblivion muffled his hearing, too. He was aware of nothing at all. Cade lifted his head. He groaned. He felt like a construction crew was pounding nails into the side of his skull. Putting a hand to his head, Cade winced. He felt not near his temple. Trying to sit up, Cade blinked to focus. The room spun. He was suddenly nauseous. He stopped moving and just sat back to his sofa. Cade tried a coherent thought. His mind felt sluggish, mushy. What was he doing on the floor? Cade tried to remember. Selena! Cade struggled to his feet. The room spun again, but he managed to stay upright. How long had he been out? He looked at his watch. Too long. The fog in the brain cleared abruptly. Selena! Cade called out. Cade's chest constricted. He tore out of the living room. Selena, racing through the dining room, Cade burst into the kitchen. He sprinted upward to the pantry and flung the door open. It was empty. Going out of the kitchen, Cade hurried down the hall towards Selena's office. He looked into the room, then he didn't see her. He ran to the half bath. She wasn't there either. Cade returned to the living room. She checked the coat closet. He found nothing but coats and boots. Cade pelted towards the stairs. He took steps 2 at a time. It was up the stairs hallway in seconds. He rushed down the hall, throwing open the doors as he went. He looked into the bathroom in his bedroom. He checked the master closet. Cade dashed back into the hallway. He started toward the guest room. Then he stopped. No, he whispered. Cade turned and looked toward the closed door of the 3rd bedroom. The door was just a door, but it suddenly seemed to pulse with a rhythm that matched Cade's rapid heart rate. Cade took a step toward the door. He wavered and steadied himself. He took another step. Finally, he forced himself to move normally again. He ran to the door. Cade's hand slipped the knob as he tried to grasp it. His arms were sweating. He wiped them from his khakis and grabbed the knob again. He turned it. Cade charged to the empty room, not bothering to look around. Cade sped directly to the closet. Throwing the door open, he tossed aside the blankets and piled to the trunk. He dropped his knees in front of it. Cade gripped the trunk's lid. Taking a deep breath, Cade opened the trunk. No, Cade cried out. Cade felt his face contort in horror. Tears filled his eyes. He clamped his hand over his mouth and he couldn't be sick. He waited to look away at the grisly contents of the trunk, but he couldn't. As he continued to stare into the trunk, Cade's shoulders convulsed. His chest heaved. Finally, he couldn't look any longer. He fell back. He dropped his head into his hands. Cade's head whipped up, though, when a whisper came from above the trunk. It came from the empty shelf above the hanging rod of the closet. The whisper contained 5 familiar words. The game is only for two. He hissed. The words drifted down Cade like a spray of toxic mist. They engulfed him and they left him in silence. Cade reached the top of the staircase leading to the attic of the house. He set down the stack of 3 boxes. He lugged up the stairs. He looked across the attic at his beautiful fiancée. How could he have gotten so lucky? He hit the jackpot again. Debbie was gorgeous, blonde, blue-eyed, petite, his sweet as stunning. Debbie was any man's dream. For Cade, she was a reality. Hey, babe, Debbie said. This is the coolest, isn't it? I've never had an attic before. Kate smiled. She loved Debbie's enthusiasm for life. Above him, rain pattered on the attic roof. The gentle tapping was soothing. So was the dark cloud sky that hung low over the house of gray straw. Kate and Debbie were moving into their new home, a big old Victorian on the outskirts of the city. They got out of the house for a song because it needed a lot of work, but Cade didn't mind. He liked the fixer-upper. Cade walked over to Debbie and wrapped his arms around her slight shoulders. Yes, it's the coolest, like you. Debbie laughed. She tilted her head back and kissed the dimple on Cade's chin. Stepping out of the embrace, she looked around the room. I can't wait to finish the attic, Debbie said. It'll make an incredible art studio. She crossed this big octagonal window in the east end of the attic. She threw her arms out and then spun in a circle. When the sun's out, the window is going to let in some amazing light. It's an incredible art studio for the incredible artists, Kate said. Debbie laughed. She turned to Kate. You're the one who's incredible. Head programmer for the biggest tech company in the state. Hard to beat that. Kate gave Debbie an aw shucks look, and he didn't disagree. His new job was going to be great. He still couldn't believe he landed it. He couldn't wait to start it. He had to move away from his mom to take the job, but she hadn't been upset about that. Janice had assured him she'd be fine. It was sweet of you to move back to be close to me, sweetie, she said. And I love hearing you nearby, but now I think you need to move on, and I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Debbie stepped away from Kate and stared into the boxes around. She set one box up on a stack of 2. Then she cocked her head and looked behind the stack. Hey, I've never seen this trunk before, Debbie said. What's this old thing? Kate crossed and Debbie put his arm around her narrow waist. Oh, he said, it's just some childhood baggage. Kate steered Debbie toward the attic door. I'm ready for a break, babe, aren't you? Let's go down and have some lemonade the new neighbor left for us. What was her name? Something old-fashioned, Debbie smiled. Winfred. Oh, that's it, Kate said. Kate ushered Debbie out of the attic and turned back to flip the light, hesitating half listening to Debbie chatter about the aunt who had an old-fashioned name of Octavia. Kate looked at the trunk. The battered old chest seemed to appear back at the gate as he gazed at it. Kate turned off the light. He closed the attic door. Thunder rumbled as the sky darkened even more. The attic was swathed in somber shadows. Nothing but blackness could be seen in the vast space, until 2 small pinpoints of light peeked up over the top of the old trunk. Wow. So I'm assuming those 2 lights were Selena and David. That's nuts though, huh? Just murdered a person like that, knowing the outcome and all that. They always said love bites. I just never thought I'd be taken so literal. Anyways, hope you guys have a super fantastic, wonderful day. People like Be Efficient. Tomorrow we will read a lot more. And yeah, hope you guys have a super fantastic, wonderful day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.